I'll concede your point just for brevity. But
What? Brevity? We don't do that around here. It's probably
No.
Citrus, or what is a Capital One Bowl? It used to be Citrus Bowl, right?
oh my
Capital
God,
One.
dude, where have you been?
I just like the real name.
It hasn't been the Citrus Bowl since like what 2002?
What was your highlight side dish from Thanksgiving?
Oh gosh, Scotch.
This is the Buck Around, the podcast devoted to all things Wisconsin Badger football from a fan perspective. Featuring your hosts, Richard Branch and Maxwell Brusky.
And hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Buck Around. Welcome back to episode 308 of the Buck Around. I am one half of the Buck Around, that being Richard Branch, joined, as always, by my timely colleague, Maxwell Brusky. Max, how are you, sir?
Timely, I like it. I like it.
Do you know why?
I feel like I'm going a mile a minute, so it timely is good.
No, this is Badger
Yeah.
related. Do you know why? You and I originally were going to record on Friday. And as you've just alluded
Yes.
to, things got a little busy in the non-Buck Around world. So we had to push back to Monday. But I think inadvertently, if you want to say, we should claim that this was planned. Pushing this show to today was great just because of the way the spring practice for the Badgers fell. You know, it's sort of this one practice and then they go away for a week for whatever reason. This was great for us because we didn't get to say something about, I don't know, a player who's not on the roster, but like we're really interested in seeing what he brings to spring. So,
Right. You know, you remember the other thing that I mentioned in that context as well.
no, I don't. Oh, basketball?
Yeah.
Oh, yes.
So that if they're not playing on Sunday, or if they lose on Sunday, there will be an increased demand for football.
You got a good point. Football season now official. Basketball season is over. Football season begins in a lot of Badger fans'
It's
eyes.
done. The non-playing portion of the basketball scene has begun, and I feel that there's a sense of impending drama among the fan base.
All right.
I don't know how much. I won't comment anymore because we don't do that here. But yes, I think waiting until after the opening weekend of March Madness, I think was probably smart anyway.
Right. So here we are.
So yeah,
So we got a lot going on, Max. We almost have real football. We have a new
I feel like we do. Yeah,
new roster. We've got a sort of practice under our belt. We have, who's around, who's not around. We have thoughts. Before we sort of get into our, we are going to do our what are we watching for spring bit. But before we do, should we just talk roster for a second? Because I do want to talk about the roster.
Let's talk some roster.
Because there was two things that I took from it. One, I have a question. As the roster came out, I guess the only really surprising departure was Jeff Petrowski, but they also lost Dokovich and Cam Large at tight end officially. The talk was, they're thin at tight end. Let's start at tight end. Do you feel that they are thin at tight end?
Actually, I don't.
Neither do I.
Yeah, I don't. Those guys, when they came in, yeah, they had a lot of potential. And what was Large? He was a junior this year? Or even a redshirt junior?
He was, I think, going to be a senior next year, like a fifth year.
Yeah. So he hadn't, it's unfortunate because all is injury related to both of them,
Mhm.
But it's not like you missed anything, really. It's unfortunate the way that happens sometimes. But as far as being thin at the position, I think having a guy in there for spring and, given what you saw out of Tucker Ashcraft, I think he's got more potential to play as a freshman. And then you've got a redshirt freshman who transferred, who did actually play a little bit.
So
I think, right?
Fun question for you to dovetail on the first part. Yes, on the McGohan thing, but I'll get to him in a second.
Yeah.
What was the combined stat line for Cam Large and Cole Dokovich? Do you know what it is?
In their career?
On any recordable stat.
Club Trillion?
Cam Large participated in 3 games. No recorded statistics, no tackles and special teams, no receptions.
Guess what else, too?
What?
I think the games that he did play, he was a fullback. I don't even think he was tight end.
he? I don't even remember.
I'm 99% sure.
But
because it was noteworthy when it happened.
So 3 games for Cam Large back in 2021. So when I hear
that sounds right.
they've lost bodies. I'm like, I mean, I don't know about you, but I wasn't. Well, we said it on the show multiple times. Like Cam Large is a coach.
Yeah.
Like he's there with a headset in street clothes, not looking like a football player. Like the writing was on the wall. So they were,
Right.
bad injury luck, especially Cam Large being a fellow nutmegger was kind of a bummer. But
You get surprisingly more of those than over the years. I don't know how many have really panned out, but it's not like you haven't had some fellow nutmeggers.
There have been some. I mean, going back to Alvarez, there were several. Like the guy,
There were, yeah, more
like
back
Moffitt,
then than now.
I think was from Connecticut. He was from Norwich, I think.
John Moffitt, yeah, I think that sounds right. It was JT Seagraves, wasn't he one too?
He
was another tight end, I thought.
Well, Allegro is Avon Old Farm,
right,
and from like 2 towns over from me. And there's another one who why am I forgetting? There's one somebody who really contributed, and I'm blanking on it. Was it Hawthorne or somebody like that? I can't remember. Going back.
Anton Hawthorne?
Yeah, like going back. Not important. We're getting we have too much to talk about.
Yeah, no.
Oh, jeez.
Dude, it's the off season, man.
It is not. It is spring football, man. So, as you said, I never saw these guys play. Number 2, you have Tucker Ashcraft coming back. You have, I think it's understated that you'll have a healthy, theoretically, Riley Nowakowski, who I think will play plenty. You got McGohan coming in. You got Seagraves, who, like, if Seagraves is your 4th tight end option, that's fine. The other thing that I think is going unmentioned, which kind of surprised me, he's still listed as a running back. There was talk of Jackson Aker being more of an H-backy type guy, kind of like Nowakowski. I have a feeling when more practices are seen, he's going to be seen more in a hybrid role that way. Because if he's still on the roster, he's a guy that they obviously kind of think they can get some use out of having around. And I think just between all that, they'll find some way to play him. And I mean, honestly, Grant Steck is 260 pounds on the spring roster. Like, if he's ready to play,
already,
if he can figure it out, they can use him. I mean, there's no reason he couldn't do this coming season what JT Seagraves did last year, which is play, 5 snaps a game. Like, I really think that should be something that happens over the course of time if he picks things up fast enough. Rob Booker, for that matter. I mean, he's no small guy either. Like, maybe between the two of them, somebody figures something out, and then you're in decent shape. But not really concerned there by that. Outside linebacker Petrowski is gone.
Do we know why? That wasn't even a rumor.
No portal. I mean, he didn't go in the portal. He didn't do anything. There's nothing known. Maybe he just said, "I think I'm done."
He must have, because he was going to play.
So he's an interesting one to me.
I think it's more impactful, just to get that out of the way.
I do think, he's more significant than the other ones because you remember seeing him on the field, right?
Yeah, well, he played. He had stats.
Right.
He's a regular contributor.
He played. I think I'm curious, looking at him. So the last 4 games of the year, including the bowl, he didn't break 20 snaps. And he was a guy who was more like a 22 to 25 snap guy. Like the most snaps he ever had, but he had 27 against Buffalo. And then sort of the meat of the season from Rutgers through Indiana, he had 23, 26, 26, 25, and 23. And then after that, it was 19, 16, 18, 17. So maybe others were pushing, and he maybe saw writing on the wall. Like Aaron Witt comes along. Maybe Aaron Witt is taking some of those now. I mean, to me, it's notable because he's a guy you remember seeing playing, to your point. But I see him and I see Aaron Witt, and I say, based on what we know of what Aaron Witt used to be, I know he's not there athletically anymore. He just doesn't have the burst that you saw 3 years ago before he got hurt. But he can do what Petrowski did before, and I have a feeling he just looked like a guy they kind of maybe, once he started getting healthy, like, oh, we'll use that guy. And it is what it is. Maybe Petrowski just said, is it really worth it doing all this for 15 snaps and I can go start my life at this point? And maybe that's what he did. But I look at with Leon Lowry, John Pius coming in, they are playing ahead of him. I mean, that's your assumption, right?
Yeah, no question. Yeah, and you make a good point about Witt too. I mean,
so he's the 5th guy,
and Witt kind of fits that. I'll be interested to see what he looks like athletically after all this time, because you're right, he wasn't quite what you remember. But even still, I don't know how much I remember. I remember how much he was like, there was a buzz around him. You know what I mean? But he does have that body type. If you look at the two guys that they brought in or the two commits most recently,
Yeah.
they're more of that long and
Yep.
lanky kind of guy at outside line. And Petrowski is decidedly not.
Right.
I mean, he looks more. He looks like he could be a defensive end in a 4-3 kind of guy.
Yeah. No, that's kind of what he was, right?
Yeah, I'm just looking at the body style
totally.
kind of thing, and that I know we'll get to our 5 things, but we're talking about linebackers now anyway. That's definitely one of the ones that I'm looking to see is who's doing what, inside and outside for that matter.
And then aside from some walk-on move, position changes, the only other thing I really thought of note on the roster was that TJ Bowlers is now officially a defensive lineman and officially 288 pounds. So feel bad for the guy who has been trying to keep weight off for 4 years. Who is finally, it's like, go free, you wild stallion.
I'm telling you, seeing rapscallion.
Not rapscallion, wild stallion. That was like a letting the horse roam free in the prairie, Max. As I waved my arm, no one can see me wave my arm. But
I just remember seeing him standing next to who is the Temple guy, the Temple transfer.
Oh yeah, Darian Varner.
Oh yeah, Darian Varner. He's standing right next to him. And there was no way, unless you were, fans of this level, that you could know which is which because neither played. So they were standing right next to each other. They looked from behind. They looked exactly the same.
Yeah,
except for their numbers. So that's good. I'm not surprised.
I'll be interested, right?
But I'll be interested to see if he's a contributor there too. Then that's definitely another one of my 5 things. Just because the numbers there are. At that position are pretty interesting. I'm just scrolling down the roster now. I hadn't really scanned it that much other than I hadn't really scanned it. Okay. Because one thing I see on there is Tyler Van Dyke is 6'4", 227. Right below him is Mabry Matoyer, 6'4", 232.
Yeah, he's a big boy.
Hello. They both are.
Well, he didn't look scrawny.
One's a freshman.
Yeah. Well, that one little video they had of Tyler Van Dyke, taking one of those kind of scaly reps. He takes a rep, throws the ball, and blah, blah, blah. And then Matoyer comes walking up behind him to take the next snap. And you're like, that that's like grown-up size person.
Right.
Like it's fully filled in.
Yeah. I did see that too. Yeah. I saw the pictures anyway. And yeah, he looks the part. Before we leave off that, the other thing I noticed, and that's only while we were talking, is that Tyler Van Dyke's hometown is listed as Glastonbury, Connecticut.
By the way, everyone who keeps saying Glastonbury, it is not Bury, it is Glastonbury, as in like a strawberry. Just helping everybody out, so everybody knows. But
thank you for that.
And I wasn't claiming you can't claim the 1-year transfer guy, can I? Isn't that? I can, but we'll see.
I don't see why not.
How much Connecticut talk?
Yeah, he grew up in Connecticut. Yeah. Hey,
how much Connecticut talk can a Wisconsin Badger podcast have? But very quiet, right? Like not a lot of position changes, not a lot of surprises. No. Do you take anything from that?
I do. I do. What I take from it is that like the roster churn that they already did like the lion's share of it already.
I think that's a fair way to think of it. They got to get down 3. They're at 88 going into summer, right? They're fine for now, but when the rest of the freshmen come in, they need to find 3. I haven't really thought about where they're going to find it. Whatever. It's going to be found.
On your calculator, I didn't go back and look before we recorded, but on the spreadsheet with the scholarship distribution, did Petrowski, Large, or Dakovich figure into that?
I took them out. That was what ended it.
You are well. That's what I'm saying. I don't know if I've looked at it since I haven't looked at it in at least a month.
Because I did a new one like a week ago, and that one is with those guys off. And then
I knew you. That's what I'm saying. I knew you did one. I just haven't looked at it yet. So those guys are off. Right. So we're still talking 3 right now.
And you don't know what the situation is for a guy like a Riley Nowakowski, or a lot of those guys are year to year. Just thinking off the top of my head.
Oh, sure.
I'm trying to remember what other walk-ons got any. I don't think there's any others on the roster, but I might be forgetting. But not important. So they got to find 3. It'll be interesting to see where they find it. We'll cross that bridge when we get to it. All right, so let's talk about practice here. We were thinking, we each came with our own sort of list of 3, or 5 things, excuse me. Doesn't have to be 5. It's just kind of the number we picked because it's a nice round number. My list is not necessarily most important, like number 1 to number 5, but it's kind of in 2 groups, which is I have things that I am looking at. And honestly, to me, I guess in a sense, they're the more important thing, which is stuff that goes just beyond what does Wisconsin football look like in 2024. More stuff that says to me, like, what is the overall health of this thing in year 2? Like, how is this whole Luke Fickell transition experiment going on? And then my last couple things are more, here's direct stuff for 2024, just because I think like they're the things that are going to tell us a lot. So yeah, so I don't know how we want to start. Do you want to go with why don't you start with your number 1 and give us your thoughts? I'll tell you if I have something similar and where it slots, and off we go. Sound good?
Yeah, no, it does. And for the inside baseball of the show prep, I mean, I didn't really look at yours, so there is some crossover, and we have quarterbacks. So and my whole thing was really, I kind of wanted to see, how does the chart rack up? What are they giving it, like Nick Evers? I put this together after Friday, and I already looked at the kind of the summary from Friday's playing session, whatever you want to call it. And yeah, I think I take from it what you will, but there was Braden Locke doing first team snaps with Tyler Van Dyke. I don't know how much that matters. I don't know how much you look into it and say, well, it's not so much like Tanner Mordecai where you're the guy. Is Van Dyke going to be that way? And it doesn't matter. I mean, is he not going to be the starter? Does anybody really think that?
No, not at all.
Even if he, if Fickell and Longo tell him he's got to earn the job, like, do you think he's not?
I'm with you. So that was the first, looking at the quarterbacks was the first thing on my list too, but maybe it was a little bit different. Mine was much more future oriented because to your point. I'm not really interested in Tyler Van Dyke. Like, I feel like there's kind of a fairly well-defined floor and ceiling we're going to see in there. Like, I don't think there's a ton of variance. I think he's a guy who will probably be fine. That would be my description of Tyler Van Dyke. It's a 95% chance he's the starter. If I was to pick like a probability, like something like that. What I'm interested in is the guys behind him. That is purely my interest. I'm interested in Evers. I'm interested in Locke. I'm interested in LeCroux. I'm interested in Matoyer. What I'm interested in is seeing that Longo can start to elevate one of these guys. Like you said, Locke took the one, so half of the 1 reps, which reading between the lines in the media availability that Fickell did, it sounds that has more to do with when they get into a little bit more live practices, and it deals with another bit of the offense, which I'm going to get to later. Like there's some limitations with the rest of the offense, and they are kind of working around that by splitting up some of the 1 reps early, I think. So I just need to see that somebody is like, oh, okay, there is a successor. Like there is separation, there is viability, there is growth, even with the younger guys. Just to say, Longo gets a win on something. Like Phil Longo kind of needs a win in my mind right now. Like something that shows what he's trying to do has a little bit more viability long-term at Wisconsin. I don't have any reason to think he can't because the guy has made good quarterbacks multiple times, and I just need to see him do it again.
Well, especially here.
That's more what I mean. I shouldn't say do it again. You're right. That's what I meant. Is like I need to see like you got to make it work in Madison, and if not, why? So yeah, I'm looking at the same thing as you, but maybe just in a different way. So for me, unless you have more quarterback stuff, I want to go to my second one.
No, not really. Yeah. Not really, except to say that we almost had a chance to mention the Nutmeg State again, but that dude's gone.
So my second thing that I'm looking for, it's a little out of order from the agenda you have, just so you know.
That's okay.
It's a future thing. Again, I'm looking at young offensive linemen, and here's why. Like we said, there was very little change on the roster. But can I tell you the one that I thought was really weird was Manny Mullins, someone you shouldn't really, no offense to him, it's not someone you're really thinking about, was moved from defensive line to offensive line. And I'm like, why the heck are you doing that? And then I started looking at the roster, and I realized it's because of numbers. Like, they have a numbers issue on the offensive line in terms of just raw players for practice. Like, they want to have 3 offensive lines for practice.
Yeah.
And to have an effective practice, you need guys who at least have sniffed the powder at the Powder 5 level in practice. He's done that. What I'm looking for from the offensive line, like, they're likely losing 4 starters after this year. Jack Nelson is done. Huber's done. Renfro is done. And I'm guessing Malman, if he has a decent year, there's no reason to stick around.
I think so too.
So you're down 4 guys. And if that happens, who are your next guys up? You have JP Benchwall and Joe Brunner, who are sort of battling on they're the 2 that I think are fighting for a starting job this year. But, one of them will be the starter. The other one's going to be the swing, because we know they're just looking for 8 this year. But those 2, I think you pencil in for starters next year. But who's next behind them? Like, who is the swing guard after that? Is it going to be James Duran? Right? Because he will be he's a second-year guy this year. And then at tackle, which is kind of the bigger issue to me, you have Barrett Nelson, who is a backup, who kind of projects. But Loki, he's 288 pounds. He's light. And he's down 4 pounds from the bowl game. Bowl game, he was listed at 292. So who knows if that was his weight at the start of the year or whatever, and they just never updated it. But he's down. And then after Barrett Nelson, you're projecting a true freshman who's coming in right now. You're projecting the Kevin Haywoods of the world. This spring, you need to see guys who can play viable football at the Power 5 level, because they are going to be required to play pretty quickly, because this line is going to have a gap.
1 year.
Yeah.
Which is crazy when you think about the whole, they had so much youth that didn't play over the past couple of years.
Right?
Yeah.
And so, this year, I think you're likely to see a walk-on or a true freshman. It's in the cards. You're going to see a walk-on or true freshman in the 2 deep. Like, I noticed Kerry Kadenko. That's why a guy like Kerry Kadenko's around, right? He's a 5th-year guy. He has size, and he can play center. So,
well, sort of. I don't know if you read.
Yeah,
he was the second center.
So he's gonna have to try to play center.
And how well he did it, who knows? But yeah, to your point, he's the backup center as it stands right now. And I don't know who else it would be. I know Colin Cumberly was taking the 3rd. He was the 3rd center. But yeah, he's pretty young.
Well, I think in the season, it's Joe Huber, because Huber was a backup center.
Oh, of course.
But for now, they're looking for bodies.
Oh, yeah.
I'm telling you, like, the thing that reminded me of, do you remember the year of Robbie Burge? When Robbie Burge was battling to be on the offensive line? This feels a lot like that. Like, Kerry Kadenko might be your Robbie Burge of 2024, if you really want a deep cut. So that's the big thing.
Kerry could do better than his older brother, Rick.
Yeah. So it's going to be interesting to me, because I think this offensive line is in a bit of a major make or break moment for next year right now. So that's my number 2.
That's a big one.
Yeah, to me it is.
That's a big one. Well, my number 2, not in any order. I think we have 2 more things in common.
Yeah.
Mine weren't in any order.
You pick one.
If we're talking offensive linemen, let's do defense.
Okay.
And I kind of already alluded to it. So, I don't think the official position switch of TJ Bowlers is that much of a surprise, but it does bring up the numbers a little bit. I don't know. Like, what do you have past James Thompson?
I know.
One of the pictures I saw, like in the Badger extra coverage, was Mike Jarvis. It's like, oh, okay. All right. That's right. Mike Jarvis is still there.
My whole question was, is there another guy who can play 35 snaps a game?
I don't know. And I'm looking over the roster again. Ben Barton will be in the rotation.
Mm-hmm.
He played plenty last year, and I think he's pretty effective. Then you got some walk-on guys. Gabe Kirschke, Will McDonald, Nolan Vills.
Yeah, there's not a lot, right?
Looks like Elijah Hills. Is Elijah Hills a transfer?
Yeah, he's the one from Albany.
Listed as a senior.
Yeah, he's the one from Albany.
He's the one from Albany. That's right. Okay. So you've got to figure he didn't come to sit on the bench.
Nope.
And then after that, you got Cade McDonald, and then the aforementioned Mike Jarvis and James Thompson. Then you've got Jamel Howard, redshirt freshman, and Ernest Willer, true freshman, who I believe he is in for spring.
Yep.
So there you go. I mean, what happens if James Thompson get hurt?
Yeah, they're in a lot of trouble.
What happens if James Thompson and Ben Barton get hurt? There's nobody else there who's taken more than, 20 snaps in a season?
Curtis Neal.
And Cade McDonald has, Jarvis has.
Kurt Neal has.
Oh, and Kurt Neal too. You know what? I'm flipping over the thing. Yeah, that's true. They list nose tackles separately.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, my
I did the
mistake.
same
But how
thing.
many of those are there?
But I mean,
yeah, you did the same thing.
To your point.
No, there's only one guy listed as a nose tackle. It's Kurt Neal. One dude. All right, so fine. What if you lose him?
You're in trouble.
What if you lose him and Thompson? I mean, that's a world of hurt, man.
The D line is not. I mean, the way I phrased it was, and this was more like a now, like the offensive line and the quarterbacks to me was 25 and beyond. The D line was very much a now thing because this defense is only going to be so good because I don't know that there's anyone on there to shift the paradigm at defensive line. Because to your point, it's who is a second player who's going to consistently play 35 snaps a game with James Thompson Jr., right? Because that's what you're looking for. Like 35 to 40 is basically the first string guys. I mean, like when you look at JTJ's numbers last year, losing Gio Paez as a transfer is like not the end of the world, but is kind of a bummer in some ways because he was a guy who at least could play, because you lost Rodas and you lost Gio. So you lost two of the top three to transfer. We saw out of Rodas. Rodas was done, and that was the end of the road for him.
Absolutely.
Gio, at least, it was like, oh, he got bet. Like, you finally saw a guy who got an opportunity to play because an NFL-bound guy was gone. And, he can, he's all right.
He's serviceable.
I mean, I think he was an under-the-radar player of the game for us a couple times. And so you lose those two, and you're left with James Thompson, and then it's, all right, so who gives you 35 snaps? I mean, Kurt Neal did 38 in the bowl game, which was, I think, the most he had by probably 15. I think before that. No, by 13. He had 25 against Iowa, which makes sense. You want a nose tackle, blah, 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 blah.
You had Paez as the under-radar player of the game in game one against
There
Buffalo.
You go. And that was it. But I know Ben Barton made it a couple times, too.
Yeah, definitely.
So my question is, who's getting 35 snaps a game? Is it Kurt Neal? Is it Elijah Hills? Which you would think, if you're bringing that guy in from Albany, he's going to be pushing it.
Yeah, I would think.
Is it Jamel Howard who kind of pushes through, but he seems like more of a nose, like Neal? Or is it just, if that's the case, like, I guess my question maybe is, how many of these guys are better than Ben Barton? Can any of them be better than Ben Barton? And it's not a knock on Ben Barton, but I'm using Ben Barton as sort of like my barometer of
it's a baseline.
Like
yeah.
he's a functional, serviceable, not a superstar by any stretch, but at least a functional defensive lineman. And is there more than one guy who's better than that, who gives you a little bit more, who's more impactful? Because I suspect inside linebacker is going to be better, but can the D-line do enough to complement the linebackers? So not just inside, I think outside is going to be better too. But I'm just curious if this defensive line is going to do enough to help those other position units be what they can be without them having to cover up, some things on the defensive line. That's where I'm looking as like, that's an immediate issue that I see in 2024 as like something that puts a ceiling on this team.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Absolutely. I'm not going back to the first law of football, but I think the major concern here for me too is that, you just went through kind of that Ben Barton analysis, right? I mean, are any of those guys, any of them have Keanu Benton potential?
No.
Like,
No.
Is there anybody in there who's a game breaker?
No.
I mean, James Thompson might be able to do it once or twice, but he's not somebody that's going to be accounted for, in a way that he has to be like designed around.
I mean,
if you're an offense,
I think if your opponent's coming into Wisconsin, he's the first player you look at on the defensive line and you spend the balance of your time preparing for.
Right.
There's no one else that comes close to him in that.
No.
respect.
And not only that, I mean, I'll do respect to him, but he's not a first or second, third team guy.
Probably not.
He'd be like one of the rotational players at Iowa, and I just don't know. For me, it's not necessarily something I'm watching to see what happens at the position. I'd like to see something happen. I just don't think it's going to, and I don't if you don't have that, so much of this is going to be held back.
Yeah. Yeah. It'll be curious.
And especially against teams with better offenses. Oregon or Penn State.
Yeah. If you can't get pressure without a lot of numbers, it's going to be tricky.
Right. Or have people that are effective against the run up the middle.
Fair enough.
So anyway, all right. Yes. So that's something I'm a little apprehensive.
All right.
about.
So here's my next one, and I'm going to go back to one of my future ones because this will knock out all three of my sort of looking beyond, if you will.
Yes. Yes.
I'm looking for a future cornerback because kind of like offensive line, after this season, the Badgers lose. I mean, we haven't seen him play yet, but I don't think he was brought in to sit on the bench. You lose Michael Mack. You lose RJ Delancey, who's a 1-year rental. You lose Forkerine, who is a very functional player. You lose Max Lofi, who rotational corner, maybe he percolates up a little bit this year. And then most likely you lose Ricardo Hallman because I don't see a reason for him to hang around another year if he doesn't need to. I mean, just don't think he can push a draft stock with another year in the system. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 corners they are going to lose after this season. Year 3, under Luke Fickell, I would like to think you're not going to be relying heavily on transfer corners anymore. I'd like to think that you can have something percolate up. You saw, Jonas DeClona and Jace Arnold play a little bit last year. Arnold was more special teams, obviously. But you need somebody from Snowden, Taylor, Tisdale. I want to see somebody there, percolate up a little bit. So, if you can have 3 guys between that, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. If 3 out of those 5 can percolate up, and then you can just slide in 1 transfer to give them a little bit of veteran experience next year, that would probably be functional. But I would just like to see this spring some guys there showing life. They're pushing some ones a little bit, getting some meaningful reps, not just guys who were out there. Last year during spring, Snowden played some safety. They kind of moved him around just to basically say, hey, look, if they're here for spring, we want to play them in spring so we're not wasting our time or their time. This year, I'm kind of hoping to see, okay, I'm seeing a progression. I'm seeing a succession plan that's kind of coming into to play because you'd like to see some life there. I mean, I guess my barometer again, if it's Ben Barton on the defensive line, for me, it's going to be our guys beating out Max Lofi. No offense to Max Lofi, but I need to see guys pushing past him at this stage because I think we've seen what he is. He's a guy who can be in a spot here and there, but athletically, I don't think he's on the level that the other guys are. You want to see if these young guys have at least the athleticism and the length to kind of push past him to find a way to be a bit more impactful in spring. So that's my big, long answer to say future cornerbacks.
There's a lot going on.
You look very sad.
I do. Cause it's, the defensive line for me paints a pretty grim picture now and going forward. Offensive line and this position, they paint a relatively grim picture going forward.
Yeah.
I think they'll be fine this year. I think it'll be totally fine this year, unless, somebody like Hallman gets hurt. But I mean, other than that, there'll be some more portal additions potentially.
You know what's funny?
But
I feel like the corners have reasonable, I'm making assumptions about a corner I've never seen play in Mac, but he can't be that bad if they fought as hard as they did to try to get him in and then they kept him around.
Yeah. And waited around.
He was in the plans.
Sure.
So I feel like, if you have Hallman, Forkerine, Delancey, and Mac as your prime, that's as deep as you've seen a corner group. Now,
no, like I said, for this year?
Yeah. So I'm okay. It's next year. They got to percolate up, and you're fine with a transfer sprinkled in. But beyond that, this can't be the long-term plan. I mean, because that's kind of been the Badgers' plan here. I mean, really think about it. It has been so transfer heavy at corner since the portal became a thing. I mean, more than any other position group. That has been where they've been living. Well,
shoot, in 2022, is it 2022 where they had 4 of them?
I mean, and the 3 starters were projected to be portal guys.
Right. Well, check this out, though. I mean, okay, but what if they brought in, though? I mean, this year you have Xavier Lucas, right? and Agard. I mean, and I feel like I'm missing a guy here just looking over the Jay Harper. I think he's one too,
No, it's
isn't
Jay
he?
Harper. Yeah.
Yeah, so I mean that is three of them. And I know and Lucas was a pretty good Florida kid. I know he was a pretty good
Yeah.
get.
So, I mean, we'll see. I mean, they're bringing in
So
numbers, which tells you they know they need numbers, right?
yeah, which is
So, I mean,
right.
that's half the
Now
battle.
you got to start
You got to
somewhere.
start
Right.
somewhere, and we'll see what happens.
Yeah.
But that's my thing is they have numbers. They have 5 young guys. They just need to hit on 60% of them, right? Which isn't the
Right.
end of the world.
Yeah.
Like, your third, that kind of falls in there where it's like, okay, get yourself 2 starters and then get a contributor type in there. So
Right.
you can do it. You just got to execute it. Like, it's not totally out of the realm. It's just a very young secondary. It may be a secondary that in 2 seasons is very good. It just may be tough sledding for a year next year. You just try to smooth that transition out with an older veteran you bring in. But yeah, that's kind of my that's my big number 4 there of the 5 here. You got another one? You want to talk about linebackers?
Yeah. No. How about linebackers?
Yeah.
And then we can come back together for one that we both
Yeah.
have. Yeah, I mean, I don't have quite as much to say about linebackers as I think the picture there is a little less grim
Agreed.
because I think they have plenty of bodies. I think they got a couple potential difference makers there too, and I think that's probably what if you're looking at 5 things I'm looking for in spring, like I'd love to see especially one of the transfers be like, oh, this guy's going to be good.
Mm-hmm.
I'd like to see that, and I feel between Lowry or Pius that you have potential guys like that.
Well, I mean, I think you can get a burst edge guy. That's just what a burst edge guy changes a lot. That's all you need.
Right. And as far as the middle goes, I think keeping Chaney around, that I think that bodes pretty well. That's a good place to start.
What do you mean? Like as a starter?
I'm not as worried about the position.
Oh.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not worried about the numbers there quite as much.
It's interesting to me. I have a feeling. I think when it's all said and done, where do you think Jake Chaney will end up in snap counts at inside linebacker?
Certainly in the top 3, probably in the top 2.
Okay, you think he stays as a starter?
I do. Yeah, I do. Yeah,
because
I think he's got that twisty thing that I think is helpful, right?
I'm trying to figure out. His trick though is I just don't feel like he has the length, and I'm curious. I think he's kept around because he understands where he's supposed to be, but maybe isn't quite always there at. Because I'm assuming the guy that's going to lead the team in snaps is going to be that Jaheim Thomas, the guy from Arkansas. I think that one I would, ink him in as like top 3 on the team in tackles, and probably I would say like top 4 in snaps. I think he's going to play a lot because he came from Cincinnati. They know exactly who they have a lot of knowledge of him as a player. And I could see him being someone, like if they did it all over again, I think they would have loved to have brought him with them last year. Like, again, going back to what we talked about before was, where we said that I think they probably miscalculated on the defense, like in terms of what they thought they had. I think they probably thought they had better fits on the inside than they did. And they would have loved to have had him come along for the ride because he would have sort of sprinkled in and then would have already been an established guy for this year rather than taking a little detour to Arkansas. So I think he's going to play a lot. That's why there's not a lot of mystery to me. And barring an injury or something, like I'll be really surprised if he's not the guy. And I think they're going to find ways to get, Tackett Curtis on the field. I think they're going to find ways.
You feel like that. Yeah, you feel
I feel like there's going to be a lot of those guys sort of moving around a lot that may push a guy like Chaney around. That's why, to me, it's funny, like I don't feel as much. I feel like it's going to get figured out. I guess that's the way I look at it. And I feel like outside linebacker, same thing. They've brought enough numbers in that they're going to figure it out. And something functional is going to come out of there. So like it never really made my list only because of that, really.
The main reason I was on my list is because I think there's way more potential difference makers in there now than there was last year. And I think so much of the defense last year was because that linebacking group just wasn't effective.
Yeah.
And I know two out of the 4 main players from that group are still here, Chaney and Daryl Peterson. But even still, I mean, I think they bolstered that big time. And I feel like there could be some guys that are going to impress out of there. And I'd like to see if that comes out in spring, that there's a reason for excitement there, as opposed to, I think we're solid there. But there's, oh man, I think we're going to be good.
Here's a question for you. So Daryl Peterson was 6th on the team in snaps last year. The only guys who had more snaps than him were Ricardo Hallman, Hunter Wohler, and then the guy that I always forget was 3rd on the team, CJ Getz, Jake Chaney, and Jason Maitre. Let's see. You have 2 of those guys are gone in Maitre and Getz. Do you think Daryl Peterson is like one of the 5 guys who has the most snaps on this defense?
I think probably so.
Do you? I don't.
Yeah, I think so.
No? I think he gets passed. I think the problem for Daryl Peterson becomes Caden Johnson.
Yeah, okay.
Because I feel like they just, not that much of a drop, but a guy who's like rotational in. Because Caden Johnson didn't play that much. That's probably a bad. That's the wrong term to use. But I feel like he becomes a 3rd linebacker, a 3rd outside guy. I really do. Like, I think he starts 6 games this year because I think the other ones are going to push him around. Like, I think they're looking for burst. And I also think guys like Allegro get thrown outside some, just to be like, hey, you try coming off the edge. I think that the difference between inside and out starts to blur a little bit with the way they want to run this defense if they get themselves to an odd front. If these linebackers are good enough, that's the other thing. If the linebackers are good enough and you can move to an odd front, it helps you with your defensive line because you don't have to play.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
As much.
Well, and as soon as you said that, I'm trying to think to myself: is he going to be more free or more protected this year than last? And then I went right back to the defensive line exercise and concerns, and then I'm kind of like, yeah, probably not. Yeah. However, I think you're looking at a Pius or Lowry that's going to take his snaps.
Yeah, to me.
Well, and I don't think it's unreasonable, but that's kind of one of the things that I'm kind of excited about because I do think those guys are potential difference.
It's definitely more fun to
look at. For some reason, I'm really excited about Pius.
Yeah, right? Me too. It's just because it's more fun. Yeah. It's more fun to look at. I don't know why. Like, there's positives there. You feel like there's an issue that the team is at least trying to address. So it makes it, I don't know.
Yeah, definitely.
I'm all in on that. At least it's fun.
Well, I don't want to get too far off, but if you go into the concerns for the future too, you do have a bunch of guys that are going to be gone at all those positions as well. So I don't know how much more of a concern it is than the other positions too, because they really loaded up in the transfer portal, and Tackett's young, so I don't think it's quite as dire, but you could definitely have that discussion.
I think so, but you know why I didn't look at it the same way was because like I've seen with Christian Allegro, granted a guy they didn't recruit, right? He was a Christ guy, but a guy that when they came in, they identified and said, let's keep him. I've seen a young player like, oh, okay, I get what they're trying to do. And they've identified somebody with some talent and a different skill set than they've had in the past that I get what they're trying. Like I get a little bit of the proof of concept, right? I've got a little taste.
Yeah.
And I feel like you're going to see them do that like Curtis as a sophomore, right? You got Gauthier and the other one they brought in. Like I'll give them the benefit of the doubt for now that they'll find a couple more bodies in there in the next year or two that I'm not as, oh my gosh, you got to figure something else out. They got the outside guys in.
No, I feel the same. Yep, I feel the same. Yep.
I look at it a little bit differently that way. So should we get to our last one here?
Yeah, last one we had running backs.
We had running backs, and I'm curious what your approach is, because for this one, for me, was a bit of a hybrid of future and now. And I'm curious what you're looking at running back.
Oh, I'm looking at both. Because I think we have Malusi's out, right? He's not playing.
Well, they said he wasn't going to participate, but he was running around a fair amount on that Friday practice. Who knows? Once they get in pads, they're just in spiders and, the shower caps.
Yeah, so he's kind of the only really known quantity. I get you have Aker, but you mentioned him being a little bit more flexible positionally, potentially. And then you have Yakimelli, and then after that, nobody knows.
Well, you have the transfer.
So,
right?
I'm just interested to see what it looks like.
Yeah,
yeah, I know. And he's a dude from Oklahoma, but what's it going to look like? I don't know.
So it's interesting to me. This one to me again is 2 parts, right? It does straddle the now and the future. You do have, I think, concerns for the now, I think.
Yes.
If everybody stays healthy, you have Malusi as your cut and go. Walker is 5'9" and 222 pounds. So he's a battering ram. And then
Right.
I guess it's Yakimelli as your third guy. With if Aker is more of an H and he's not in the running back rotation, but like sort of Yakimelli is a lot like Isaac Arendo in the past, where it's like kind of feels tracky as a running back. Like he's kind of a straight line runner, but that can be perfectly functional as a third back. I mean, that works perfectly fine.
I thought a lot of times he looked pretty decent last year. He wasn't a game breaker, and he had the fumbles, but even still, I thought he looked okay.
I mean, as long as he doesn't fumble the ball, I don't think he hurts you. That's the way I would describe it.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I would agree. Yeah,
but you can't talk. I mean, he's not injury prone. He has terrible injury luck, but I just can't. Mentally, you're always like, what happens when Malusi gets hurt? What can they do?
right.
And that's where you're like, So I am just curious, because it's another issue they have to start addressing for the future, is can somebody push for that number 3? Like, is Ituka coming in early, pushing for 3? I think it's interesting. I mean, they don't have the other 2 in, but at least you got 1 in for the spring to see what he can do. Or Nate White gained 15 pounds in the offseason and he looks a little bit more running back size, but can he make any noise? Because he kind of needs to, I think, for his future. Big room. I mean, even Fickle, was the first thing Fickle said about the running backs when he was asked about the running backs. Well, that's a big room. Or maybe it was Longo. I think it was actually Longo. I take that back. Wow, that's a big room. So you know what the running back situation, like 90% of it is going to be this year, but that last 10% portends,
there's some intrigue there. And I feel like with the running backs, no matter what year it is, there always seems to be spring stories.
They always are.
That's always one, and I guess I'm kind of interested to see if A, there is one, and B, if that person will be a contributor, if not a difference maker.
Fair enough.
But if you look at where it might come from, who knows? Maybe it is Ituka. I don't know.
Right.
I don't know.
One of those guys has got to hit.
So anyway, out of the 3 freshmen, yes, one of them has to hit for sure.
So I think that's my spring. It's an anxiety, but not really an anxiety about the now. But...
Well, just wait though. So that was kind of my last thing, because it's much more amorphous, because I said I'm kind of interested to see what kind of different vibe there is. And do we think, because they're not a favorite by any means, I don't, you can take some positives away from last year. And yes, they did finish over 500, but last year, it's the same as the year before, and you replaced a coach.
Yeah.
So you don't have the new coach feel. You don't, and everybody at this time thought, oh gosh, there's plenty of players on this roster that are pretty good. Oh, I think they should win the West. It might be a challenge. It might be tough getting by Iowa, but I think they should win the West. And we were so wrong. So I think, there's a lot more apprehension, or I don't know, is it people more realistic, which makes sense. But I don't know how you feel about that. I mean, and whether or not, because I feel like there's an element, you said like Longo needs some success, right? I don't know if he feels that way, but I have to think he does a little bit, because he's probably not used to having that happen to him. And sure as hell that Fickle is not used to this happening to him. And he's kind of been really candid about it.
I mean, he did say like that this year kind of made him crazy.
Yeah. So. Yeah. And if those are things you can fix, I think you can, but it's just a lot different, because they're not going in as a favorite. It's a new Big Ten too, so I think nobody really knows how everything's going to wind up. But if you go down the list and you go down the schedule, last year you went down the schedule. If we were doing this at this time last year, you could look at that schedule and see a whole bunch of Big Ten West teams, but that ain't the case no more.
Right.
And out of the Big Ten West teams that you do play, like one of them's still the defending division champion. And I don't know, is Iowa going to be better this year or worse? I don't know. Probably better. I don't know. But you look at the schedule on this, where are the wins going to come?
Well, right. Yeah.
Alabama?
Well, I mean, I guess if you want to paint rose colors here, you have USC without a great quarterback, right? Without the first overall draft pick. Alabama transitioning to a new coach.
I mean, if you want to catch Alabama, now's the time.
This is a great time to catch Alabama.
Yep.
But I mean, you're looking, to your point, I think your ceiling is in that 9-3 range. Like, and is that
Yeah,
enough?
I think the ceiling is, and it's not just that. I mean, I hate to use the word chastened because it's not the right word, but it's just such a different vibe from last year.
Yeah.
And and I'll be interested to see what we're doing this after having one session, what the feeling will be like at the end. And after the end of spring practice, and whether you feel any better, more excited, less excited, more apprehensive. I mean, defensive line, I know I'm gonna be worried about that.
Right.
It's gonna affect everything for me.
Well, so maybe it's not even a vibe, but an observation, which I already
Mhm.
have, and it was in that first day of practice and the clips they put together. There are guys on that team that are all but explicitly saying, like, they kind of coasted last year and they weren't all in last year, and some guys took days off. You get a lot of vibes about talk like that, about, like, how hard are you going to work? You got to work every minute we're here.
Yeah.
If you want to be what we can be, and we're not going to, do this, do that. Eh, You get the sense that there is, like, this team has a lot of, I don't know, hunger is I don't like that term because it's loaded. What
Well,
I mean,
that's what I mean. It's like I can't use chastened, but what you're saying is the same. It's not the right word either, but that's what they
they're
sound like.
self-conscious of, they're conscious
Yeah.
of, I think in their minds, like, they had a missed opportunity because they think they were better than they should. They were better than they played, is in their minds. So I'll
Right.
be curious how that carries into through spring, to your point.
Yeah.
All right.
And it's so different from last year.
So we're coming up on an hour here, and we haven't gotten to Kyle's question, which I think we should get to, which was specifically about last show. And then we can let everybody go, and then we'll circle back for some spring practice updates, if that's all right with you.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I think that's fine. And I think we just did some kind of conclusions of what to expect from spring there. So, no. And again, Kyle's question is specifically about the last episode.
So we better slide it.
Let's do it.
So Kyle sent us
For Kyle.
a note on Patreon. He asked, hey, it was discussed on episode 307 that both, what did we decide? Was it Leteju? That's what we said, right? Leteju and
yes.
Petaway didn't have big or serious offer sheets. And I think there is a little bit more to that, particularly with Petaway. Leteju is solid for an East Coast kid. He has Boston College, Duke, Maryland, Pitt, Syracuse, Wake Forest, West Virginia, but interestingly, no Rutgers. Yet I think Petaway could have been close to blowing up. He had offers from any of the Big Ten usuals, Illinois, Minnesota, Nebraska, and Rutgers. But where it gets interesting is a couple of his late offers were USC and Washington. I'm wondering if Wisconsin/AJ Whitlow knew that they needed to try to shut this down early before he got bigger offers.
Yeah, my guess is Kyle's right on both. What I meant when I said that was that there's no blue blood type. Those are very, very serious, solid offer sheets, but there's no blue blood types there. If you want to consider USC and Washington, that fine, USC, yeah, but USC is kind of wacky on defense right now anyway. And Washington has a new coach, blah, 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 blah. But I don't know. I suspect he might be right with maybe some of those bigger programs. Looking at plan A and plan B, I don't know.
I have a feeling what my take from Kyle there is, I love the optimism and the excitement about every recruit. But these guys feel like Wisconsin.
Which was your point the whole time.
Which is, they're fine.
Last time.
And, like, I don't think if people are truly interested in, let's use Petaway, since his is a little bit more of a fleshed out example. If USC really wants Petaway, or Washington really wants Petaway, they'll keep pursuing. This doesn't close any doors. I think the only way it might close doors is, what's the return for us? Can we get a similar player somewhere else? And my question is, were those offers from USC and Washington committable? Probably not. Not at this point.
Probably not.
This was a dialogue starter, and he was probably a plan B, which, being a plan B for USC, is a very good player. Don't get me wrong. Even on, a defensive lineman, sounds good to me. I mean, I got no problem with him, but I don't think there's anything there that makes me say, wow, these guys are significantly different than what they've gotten in the past.
Well, and as we were talking about it, I'm trying to think, I was thinking too, because both of these guys were relatively, like, unproven in high school and relatively new to the game. And I think the programs with NIL stuff to really, like, the big spenders, I don't think they're going to invest that in a relative unknown with, like, high upside. I think you've already got to be in the, yes, He's been a man among boys since he was in 4th grade. He's been all state. He's been all this. Like, I think you got to be the really highly touted prospects nowadays to get the big blue blood offers. So I'm going to walk back a little bit what I said as far as I'm about to blow up.
Maybe. I mean, we don't know. Maybe.
I don't know. I think in the old days, I think probably that might have been the case, but now I'm not so sure because I think they allocate that pretty differently now.
Yeah, we'll see. But to your point,
yeah,
Kyle's theory gets tested as we move through the spring and summer. See what happens with these guys. See if other teams come knocking.
Yeah, that's true. And you're right. Yeah, if you're right, if they still want them, they'll. If they still want them, they will make that.
I mean, to the point, Ohio State is after the safety whose name I can't think of right now.
Yeah, Cody Haddad.
Thank you, Haddad.
Yes, I saw that.
So I mean, that would prove something out to you. Like, oh well, there's a team taking an active interest in a guy. That would prove out a theory like that. So if that continues to happen with a guy like Petaway, then you look.
Prove it, I don't know, but another data point.
Yeah. So I think on that note, Max, we've hit everything. I mean,
I think so.
An hour
I think
of
so.
top shelf content, if I may say so myself.
Definitely.
All right. So I guess
it might not be the Pappy, but it's definitely the Weller.
So they're quiet this week. We'll plan this out for people to listen. They can hear how the sausage is made. Obviously nothing for the Badgers this week. Maybe we tentatively think about coming back together second half of next week if we get enough to pull together. Otherwise, we'll do the following week and we'll just have the extra show at the end of spring practice type of thing. So we'll have our usual density or of shows or frequency of shows that we do around spring. It may just be depending on how this thing times out, where we put them, that they make the most sense and they are the most content rich, if I may use such a pompous term.
Yes, yes.
We'll do that. We'll plan accordingly around that. That makes sense?
It does. It does. The only other housekeeping thing that I would have is do you have any indication or have I missed anything about what a launch might look like? I mean, there's no spring game.
They're very...
I don't know if they'll do that again. I think that's looking like it will be something like that, but I don't know is there a date for that yet?
They're thinking maybe an open practice of some kind.
Yeah. Well, that's what the launch was.
Yeah, fair point.
But I mean, as long as it's not April 14th, 13th or 14th, I will probably plan on being there.
All right.
So,
all right. Well,
just throwing it out.
Plan accordingly, everyone.
Yeah.
A potential meet and greet situation for Maxwell Brusky.
Potential meet and greet situation, yes. And yes, we'll see how it goes.
All right. So I think on that note, Max, until the next time.
Okay. Sounds good. Until the next time.
Bye-bye, everybody.
Enjoy the conversation? Head on over to buckaroundpodcast.com to find all the ways to connect with the show, links to our Patreon page, and feeds for every major podcasting platform. We want to thank each and every one of our patrons. You make this podcast possible. This has been The Buck Around, Badger football analysis from a fan perspective.